Thank you for connoisseurs of artful cinema everywhere. Space porcupines have always been a passion of mine, and so I'm glad to share it with you. This is a very strange experience. First, I want to thank Ted for choosing this of all the movies in the world, and all the juke joints in the world. You chose this.
I walked right into Critters too.
You did. But it's very special because when it opened, I went on opening night to the Universal City movie theaters. There were 3 people there. I would call it a disaster, but it didn't cost enough to qualify as a disaster. So we'll talk about it as much as you like afterwards, and I hope you have a good time with it. I had an amazing time making it. It was the first feature film I directed, and it could have been the last, but it wasn't, and I'm here with you to celebrate that fact. And thank you for all being here in a sold-out screening of my first movie, so be kind.
I didn't realize that he's Steve Smith on American Dad. So that was, so when I was watching the movie, I kept hearing him yell all these things out, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, it's totally Steve Smith. So that was really fun. I've kind of, in the years since I've last seen it, I've reevaluated who a lot of the actors were. I really liked that so many people cheered when Eddie Deason showed up. So that was a good reaction.
And he's exactly like that in real life.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, when he's got the gun after he's transitioned from Lee, he's got the gun, and so he said, "How do I fire this?" And I said, "Okay, well, don't fire it yet. I'll give you a cue, and you'll push this button." "Which one? This one here?" So we had to reset the charge.
So you actually gave your actors weapons that fired?
Well,
you gave Eddie Deason a weapon that fired?
Once.
Yeah, good call. So, the rest of the cast in this, before we kind of open up to the crowd, that's, for your first film, this movie has this incredibly fun cast. It has a huge cast. It's actually a really, really large cast. You're shooting on this large, I won't say cityscape, townscape, as it were, with a massive amount of special effects, including like the critter ball. That's a crazy amount of stuff to handle for your first film. So, before I, like I said, open it up to everybody else, my big question is, how did you balance all that?
It was really, really hard. I did not want my first movie to be an effects movie. And one of the first things sent to me after I kind of established myself as a screenwriter, was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And I thought, God, I can't do an effects movie like that first time out. Yeah, but I would have had the money to pay for it. So it would have been a good choice. This had animals, kids, special effects, visual effects, puppets, everything that's really, really difficult. No CGI. It was pre-CGI days, obviously. Hardly state of the art. That ship, the 2 Charlies crossing one another. Did you gasp? So you could see through them a little bit. But it was really, really difficult, and yet, we were treating it like Shakespeare, and we were treating it as if it were the next, major motion picture, because you have to give it all every time out. You have to love it from beginning to end. And the days were hellishly long. Alan Holtzman, who'd done a couple of Roger Corman movies, including Forbidden World, did some second unit for me. Mostly it was shooting shots of puppets in fast food, things like that. But it was we had a really good team, and a really good group of people. The Kyoto brothers worked their asses off to create all the puppets and the critters and the like, which look fake as hell, but it's really okay, And the director of photography, Russell Carpenter, went on to win the Oscar for Titanic. So we had some kind of good people. They all graduate from me. I stay down in the gutter.
So you were making the comments about the Krites earlier and how they don't really look real. I'm in love with them. I think they're the cutest creatures on the face of the earth.
I can introduce you.
I would love that. Yeah, I see we have a Krite in the front row. I noticed it.
Can we show it?
Would you please show this Krite to the audience? It's blowing my mind.
This is not a real Krite. It's a phenomenal
oh my God.
replication.
It's like, yeah. Oh my God. speaking of the critter ball, I mean, but before the giant critter ball, so throughout the movie there are countless scenes of just critters rolling around. And
cheap and easy.
It does not look like people are just bowling with critters. Is that actually what? Okay, well, how was that done?
Some of the times they were, but on other times there are. Well, you couldn't do wire removal in those days, so if you look close in some places, you will see wires. But there were either vehicles, usually an ATV vehicle, and each of the critters had a rod through the middle, and on either side, the wire was connected to a V to a long wire, and they were mounted together, so it was like a carpet of rolling critter balls that were being tugged right off camera. There's an ATV on.
Because the thing that blows me away is they actually look like they're rolling, which is,
well,
like it sells the effect.
Yeah.
Is, you know, in, like I said, not having seen this about 15 years, when I was watching those shots, I remembered them all being just kind of dragged along the ground. So when you see them all rolling, it's kind of like, this works. These guys are out for blood.
Well, this may be a Space Porcupine movie, but it's a Space Porcupine movie with sentiment.
Amen.
It's heartfelt.
So my last question before I'm going to open it up is, speaking of the critter ball, the massive, the super crate at the end of the movie, how fucking hard was it to shoot that thing? Because it is enormous.
It's enormous. There are two of them.
Okay.
One is a giant beach ball with critter pelts, crite pelts sewed together all around it. That the other one is actually, it must have weighed a ton. And there were all of these automated critter heads all mounted.
You
all
see
the
them
way
like
around.
chomping, yeah. Yeah.
And so there were two of them. In one of the shots, you can see two pair of legs behind the big one doing this. So not that I want to ruin the veracity of critterdom here, but if you look close, you do see that. But mostly it was, again, it had an axis and it was being dragged by an ATV. But when it's the inflato ball, like the one that rolls over the guy and leaves the skeleton behind, there are a couple of stagehands running and losing their breath. And
so good.
So, you know, spare nothing.
Well, and
veracity is everything.
I remember the first time I saw this movie around the time it came out,
1988.
88. I remember watching the end of the movie and the burger joint exploding, and me thinking, well, the scene from the poster hasn't happened yet, so I'm just waiting for it. So
that's right.
I was a very astute 10-year-old.
That's a bright kid. Jesus.
I was like, I want to see that giant critter ball that I've been watching on these posters for the past month. So with that, I'm gonna like this.
How many of you saw the movie in a theater when it came out? You're all here. Wow, amazing. Every single one of you. Okay, great. Thanks for the career.
And how many of you saw this film for the first time tonight? Oh,
really?
Man.
Wow.
Now, how many of you never saw the first film? Oh, so we got a few in the
And did
crowd.
it matter?
Okay. Did it matter? Do you feel like you followed along? You got who Charlie was?
Because I never saw the first film. So no.
Let's zing. How about 3 and 4?
3 and 4, both written by David Scow, by the way, great horror author. But I did not see them all the way through.
Yeah, well, we got some DiCaprio.
DiCaprio's first movie, number 3.
Yeah. And is it Angela Bassett in the 4th one?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So and Eddie Deason in yours. So
did he come back? Oh, in mine.
No, yeah. No.
And Barry Corbin from No Country for Old Men, and just an amazing actor, and of course Lin Shaye from the Insidious movies. And
And I suppose I should open this up to the crowd. I could just talk to Mick all night. So go dead center, right back there. Tony.
Tony! Hey, Tony Timpone, former editor of Fangoria, ladies and
Hey,
gentlemen.
Tony.
And Mike Gingold, former editor of Fangoria.
And there's a mic over there. What you got, Tony?
Well, was there a challenge while making this movie between a struggle to do sort of like a Spielbergian kind of PG-13, PG fantasy, and a heart of R, which there's a lot of elements in as well?
Well, the question was there a challenge making it as a PG-13 Spielbergian sort of thing, as opposed to an R? Well, we were saddled with the PG-13 from the beginning. And I had been writing for Steven Spielberg for Amazing Stories and Batteries Not Included. And that's why they hired me, because they wanted that Spielberg magic. Well, instead they got the Garris shit. But yeah, it wasn't a struggle, except I didn't see how I was going to get that Playboy Playmate thing in there. And for some reason, because it did not involve sexuality, we were cool with it, which is great because, I know many people that's their nighttime fantasy. So either end. But no, it was always going to be a PG-13, and it was walking a line of the violence and the nudity and the like, but somehow we made it. There's really nothing that hit the cutting room floor that shouldn't have. So.
Maybe. And it's funny because I think a lot of people think of Grover's Bend as like Spielbergian. It's funny because I always think of it as very like Stephen King, which is, another part of your career. There's so many Stephen King connections. When I see that little town, I feel like it's right out of a Stephen King story.
Well, basically what I wanted it to be was Norman Rockwell Goes to Hell.
Yeah. That's nice.
Kind of a theme that I like, and I did the same thing with Sleepwalkers. You take this idyllic small town setting that is middle America that people think of as an imaginary America that was so beautiful and wonderful and nostalgic, and just kick it in its teeth,
I'd kill for a Norman Rockwell Crite painting. That would be the centerpiece of my home.
Well, we'll bring him back.
Another question? Yes, right over there. Brian?
Yes.
Yes.
As a geek who just loves character actors, you mentioned Barry Corbin a little while ago, who plays Sheriff Parker. But he was played by
Emmett Walsh, yeah.
The first one is just as cool. But is there a reason why he didn't reprise the role, or?
Apparently, now I didn't have anything to do with the first Critters. I won't call it Critters 1 because it wasn't called Critters 1, it was called Critters. Apparently, he was a handful. And they said, really, you don't want this. So I took their warning to heart. And Barry Corbin is an amazing actor and a really great guy, and still working and doing wonderful, wonderful work. And that Texas accent is his. He doesn't play a part that's not a Texan, but a really wonderful guy and a great actor. And I'm sure most of you have seen No Country for Old Men, and he's pretty spectacular in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Anybody else? Yes, in the back there on the left. You say yes.
Oh, beautiful. I just found the fast food, what is it, heifer?
The Hungry Heifer.
The Hungry Heifer scene to be the by far sloppiest moment of the film. I just love to hear tales of filming the carnage of ketchup and.
I assume you mean sloppy in an endearing way.
I know it's a comment on the filmmaking, so fuck you.
Not especially fun to clean up and to get the mustard out of your.
Well, you have people to do that. They're the mustard wranglers were very effective. Like I said, Alan Holtzman did a lot of the second unit work on that, so we would shoot a lot of the key scene, most of the work that was done in the scene. Anything with the actors were done first unit, but anything that we could not get to that day, after we wrapped, then Alan would come in with a skeleton crew and do shots of, critter eyeballs going boing, 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 which, by the way, was my voice speeded up going boing, 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 boing. So I do a lot of voices in there, including the cheeseburger. Thank you. My mother's proud.
You heard
my
it
sister
here
is
first.
here. So yeah, but it really, thank goodness for the second unit that Alan did such a great job with, and the special effects and visual effects and all were. Pete Coran did some amazing stuff. Fantasy 3 did some fantastic miniature work. All of the little critter balls gathering out in the field, to me, still looks real, and those were all done on a tabletop. So pretty amazing stuff. Yeah.
Well, the hungry heifer sequence, as it was happening, my wife actually leaned over to me and she, obviously the first Critters, was created kind of in the shadow of the success from Gremlins, and they had these tiny monster movies that were
So
coming
this is
out.
a sequel to a low-budget ripoff of Gremlins.
Right, exactly. Yes. A wonderful sequel to a low-budget ripoff of Gremlins. But
I'll leave it to you to say that.
yeah, you know it. But my wife leaned over to me and she was like, this scene reminds me a lot of the bar scene from Gremlins. It has kind of that same frenetic sort of, which is I think one of the most memorable scenes in Gremlins when the Gremlins are all cutting loose and going crazy.
They had a budget.
Yeah, they had a budget.
And frankly, at that time, I was so overloaded with everything that was going on that I never once thought of Gremlins while we were making this, although that may not seem to be the truth. It really is, because you're so far underwater trying to make your days on this. This cost $4 million. Gremlins, I think, cost 20, something like that. But I mean, what they got for their money, that movie was worth 10 times what it looked, what it actually cost.
So's this.
10 times $4 million, not so sure. But, especially in 1988 dollars. But hopefully at least double. But I didn't think of it at the time, even though it seemed so obvious that was what it was. But I did think of Warner Brothers cartoons.
And so the sound effects especially.
Sound effects and goofiness and tweets as they shake off their...
When anyone hits the door.
Yeah,
bonks his
exactly.
head. Yeah.
And, it was so blatant and obvious, but I still love doing the bowling ball thing.
Where
all of the
hit the people
in the
and you get
row,
the strike crash.
Exactly. So
it's good stuff.
So like I say, I'm an art filmmaker.
Get another question?
Right front.
Yeah, right in front.
Hi. So this is a comedy sci-fi horror movie. A very good combination.
And a love story.
Yes. It succeeds on most of those levels. So what in those genres? What inspired you, comedy, sci-fi, horror wise? What were some of your inspirations in those genres?
Well, frankly, I had been working with Steven Spielberg, and he was a huge inspiration, still is, insofar as blending humor with it. This is the only comedy I've ever made, and I'd love to do it again. I've had humor in most of the things I've done, but never something as blatant and drop your pants clownish as this movie is. But inspiration-wise, Spielberg was a huge part of it. In general, as a filmmaker, I was a screenwriter before I started directing, and the people who most impressed me as writers were earlier. They were Preston Sturges, they were Billy Wilder, and people like that who really kind of invented the language of film writing. It was scenarists rather than screenplay writers or teleplay writers and the like. And but I grew up watching the Universal horror movies on television, and the Roger Corman Poe movies, and all the big bug sci-fi movies, them and all of those things. And really what the producers were trying to do was a modern Western that really was in the shape of a sci-fi horror comedy. So all of the stuff in the church, that was really inspired by John Ford stuff. I wasn't a huge Western fan at the time, but at that time I started watching John Ford and appreciating what he did, particularly in the painterly ways he presented things. But to have Sheriff Harv be the great Western hero who fumbles his spinning of the guns, but what the hell, it's Barry Corbin, so it's worth it. But it really was classic cinema, and more contemporary was the influence of working with Steven Spielberg and being around when he was doing Poltergeist and E.T. and just watching people working on amazing stories, which was my first writing job. And the first produced screenplays I had, watching Martin Scorsese direct a script that I wrote, watching Robert Zemeckis direct a script that I wrote. Zemeckis was a huge influence as well, particularly with how he would blend humor with horror and suspense, and just not being afraid of being silly. And in most projects, you kind of have to be afraid of being thought silly before, you have to be ahead of an audience rather than them being ahead of you. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
That was a great answer.
Time for a few more. Over there, Mike.
I noticed David Dewey had the original screenplay credit. What changed from his version of the script to yours?
Well, David Toohey was a just starting to be successful screenwriter at that time, and he was selling lots of scripts and the like. And I went a little darker and a little goofier. The gorier things, the transformation of the Playboy Playmate, and a lot of the Warner Brothers cartoonishness came from me. And Nana was based on my grandmother, whom I called Nana. And there were some things, it got a little bit more sentimental too, which playing that straight in the face of everything you have to do the next day with puppets was something. But the actors were really up to the task. And, Herta Ware was an 80-year-old actress at the time, and so memory was an issue with her on sometimes, and so juggling all those things. But I think more of the darkness and more of the unrestrained humor, shall we say, is something that I brought to the picture. But the structure was pretty much as David had created it, and he did a really good job. But they told me, do what you want with it, and so they got there once, and it flopped. So basically, that's what I brought to it: failure.
It's 2017. You're sitting in one of the coolest theaters in New York City with a packed house of people who are here for this movie. So I don't know if we can necessarily call it a big failure. I mean, hey, look at this.
Well, where the fuck were you in '88?
I'm guessing not born.
Yeah.
4 years old.
All right. Okay.
I think we got time for a few more. One in the back, right back there. You, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we all kind of take lessons from things we work on or we create. If there was something that you remember that kind of taught you a lesson during Critters 2, what was that? Like, what was something that kind of you took on to something else?
Well, there were a lot of lessons I learned from this because I had never worked extensively with special effects before. This is a small movie, but it was a big movie for what I was used to and for what we were trying to do. And it's to take everything seriously and trust your instincts, because people are going to try and talk you out of it into doing something easier. An easier way or a more familiar way that they've done it before. Oh, I can do this because we do that. Well, I don't want to do it the way you did it before. I want to do it this way and try something new. And to, I was talked out of things that I wished I hadn't been, and I was very inexperienced. And there were people who knew a lot better than I did. But what I carried with me and still do is to trust my instincts, let myself be talked out of the bad ones because I have those too, but trust yourself on the good ones. And if it works, then you've done something special and new and unique. And if it doesn't work, well, better luck next time. It's everything's an education, and don't stop learning. I've been doing it, directing now for 30 years. And I still feel like I'm new at it every time out. And I don't want to feel any other way. I don't want to feel like I know everything I'm doing. Because I know a lot of directors who say, I could do that in my sleep. And they do. And I always want to feel like there's something new coming. And I learned an undying respect for digital projection tonight.
You mean those parts where sentences just kind of disappeared into another? Yes.
It's the writer in me.
Yeah. Like, it's slaved over that line. It's like,
The agony.
the film burn.
And the defeat.
Yes, the Crite in the front row.
Any memories of the late Roxanne Kernahan who died, unfortunately?
Yeah, Roxanne was somebody who we had actually gone to Playboy because we wanted somebody who had done a photo shoot for them. And although she was never in the magazine, they had done a photo shoot. So we were able to mock up a Roxanne Kernahan Playmate of the Month. Roxanne was great. She was a real trooper. She passed away several years after the film was made in an auto accident. And so, well, there go your wet dreams now, right? But she was a real trooper. the day that we shot her nudity, walking across the field towards the church, was the coldest day in Southern California in 100 years. So it was like 28 degrees, and she was out there in her starkers, and she was just great. But one of the things that was really great about her was her comedic stuff. She was really able to handle the comedy very well. When she comes out holding out of the hungry heifer after blowing all the krites away, she's got the cup, the Coca-Cola cup, and she's
So good.
biting the straw. That was her idea. She really played it. And I had nothing but respect and affection for her. And it really broke our hearts when we heard that she had passed away. Really a good actress, a really good human being, and terrific to work with.
I think we got time for one more. Go with this lady right in the dead center here.
When so Klingons have their own language and a whole dictionary behind them. Does the creation of the Krite language have its own sort of philosophy? And I know you were one of them, but there are other people on the crew doing the voices of the little critters when you finally recorded it.
Well, we had a loop group doing voices at the end. There's a guy named Frank Welker who did a lot of the Gremlins voices and stuff. We couldn't afford him. So, well, we did rely heavily on the Carl P. Anno Institute of Intergalactic Semantic Research.
It's on the end credits there.
Yeah,
As the correct
good.
translators? Is that what it was?
Yes, yeah. They were an invaluable resource, if imaginary. But no, we just kind of went.
Cheeseburgers.
Actually, that was translated as cheeseburger.
Weezbo. So that's all we have to go on the correct language with is Weezbo is cheeseburgers.
Rijero. Nobody asked me to do Critters 3, and I'm kind of relieved. I made my Critters movie. I've made my statement, and I stand by it. And you know, it was a great experience, and I did go on to do a lot more effect stuff, but nothing as elaborate in this size. And you know, I was happy to move on. So, but no, the 3 and 4 were made direct to video, and they were made back to back at the same time. And I definitely would not have wanted to do that at that time in my career.